So anyway, couple more clips I want to play. Aaron Ross Sorkin did a report on MSNBC when Donald Trump was in Washington last week. He made a visit at Capitol Hill, but he was there for sort of like this big summit of a lot of CEOs and corporate people and business owners and stuff like that. So he could talk to them and basically convince them, hey, I'm your guy, make sure you vote for me. But Andrew Ross Sorkin was on Morning Joe with Mika, and he gave a report based on some of the people that he talked to that were at that meeting. And what he said was really interesting. Take a listen to this.
Takeaways from Trump's meeting with business leaders. What was the reception like?
Well, it was interesting. I spoke to a number of the CEOs who were at that meeting yesterday, a number of whom, frankly, had been predisposed to President Trump, in fact, former President Trump. And they walked away from that meeting, I think, a bit disheartened, a bit questioning, I don't want to say his mental fitness, but questioning just how meandering, how in some cases one said to me, he could not keep a thought straight. He would go in one direction and then he'd go in another direction.
Sounds like what they're accusing Biden of. But real quick, I mean, he starts off by saying that they were predisposed to Donald Trump. They knew who he was. They've heard him talk before. But this time they heard him talk and they're like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Let's get back.
This is getting bad.
Yeah.
And that there wasn't really necessarily a through line to the way he spoke or what even he was talking about. At one point, and you described it earlier, he discussed his plans to bring the tax rate down from the corporate tax rate down from 21% to 20%. And apparently, at some point in the meeting, was asked about why he had chosen 20%. And he said, well, it's a round number. And I think that unto itself had a number of CEOs shaking their head, given that 1% of the total tax burden on the country is actually a huge number in terms of what is needed to support the revenue for this country. So while I do think that there are policies and major policy differences between President Biden and the former President Trump, and that many in the business community think ultimately that some of the policies that President Trump would enact may very well be better, at least for business, than the ones that President Biden has on offer. I think there was a concern about whether we were going to see a similar movie to the last presidency, where.
All right, so you get the point, and that's basically a lot of business people who have some concerns, not about Donald Trump's policy, but about his demeanor and his brain, how it's working now.
Support him because they don't care. They don't want to be regulated. And that's the pathetic thing about America. It's one thing to be capitalist, but this is just really pathetic. You know who he is. You know he's a pig, and you know he's a pig with some type of early onset dementia or some issues cognitively. But you're like, you know what? They're going to give us some cuts and they're going to deregulate. So who cares?
Yeah. I mean, as business owners, and maybe obviously, I think they think these things through. And if all of them, had the same, I'd be surprised if all of them didn't come up with the same sort of, idea of how they wanted things to go. But when you're, first of all, talking about this gunslinger who clearly doesn't know what he's talking about really with anything, he's talking about putting these 10% tariffs on everything and getting rid of the, income tax. And every single economic expert said that would be a disaster for the economy, that Donald Trump, if he took over and extended his tax cuts, would just explode the national debt again. So,
you know what would happen? He would sit on his fat ass, golf, and eat Burger King. 4 years, a Democrat would come along and they would blame it all on the Democrat.
But my point, though, Lana, is that these CEOs and business owners know better. They know, what's causing this and what's not. So my question is with this thought in their head, And if the economy is not going to be thriving as much under Donald Trump, how does that benefit them? Even if they get their taxes cut, even if they get from 21 to 20%, so it's an additional 1% on the corporate tax rate, which again is still ridiculous. And that's a reason why I think maybe I'm answering my own question, because I know if Biden's in, the corporate tax rate is going to continue to rise.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, what's that saying, that half a dozen, one or the other, whatever the fuck they say. And maybe it still works out better for them if you continue to cut the corporate tax, even though the economy is not working as well.
Right.
Or would you rather have a well-working economy and pay more in corporate tax? And my guess is they probably don't want to pay more in corporate tax.
Exactly. They don't care about, and what are we talking about anyway? Them donating money to Trump? Like, what difference does it make if corporate people are feeling funny about Trump? What does that matter? That's the question.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess it doesn't. I mean, I would hope that they would, look at the bigger picture, like somebody like Mark Cuban, when he comes out and says, yeah, I should pay the amount of taxes that I'm paying. He comes out and says that, he would rather have a better economy than than.
But how does that help Biden? Like, how does that translate into like votes and what we need to win in November?
Well, I'll tell you how it does, because most Americans are not on the side of continuing to cut the corporate tax rate. Most Americans are not on the side of continuing to give billionaires, better than they already have. And in fact, most Americans don't really even understand what has happened to them since the 1950s. I mean, since the 50s, and this is just on the economic side, forget about all the other, I don't forget about, but you know what I mean? It's just, I'm separating this from all the other shit that's gone down in this country. But just on the economic side, in the 50s, we had a lot closer of, the people who were at the top versus the people who were middle class. I mean, it was fairly distributed. And as time went on,
really.
Well, I think at the time it was
more weren't included in that. You said the 50s. I'm like, what are you?
Well, so when I'm saying this, I'm not saying this. I'm just saying if the same system were in place for all people, is what I'm meaning.
Right.
So yes, and that's what I'm saying. Clearly, everything is not the same, for everybody. But I'm saying if the same system was in place, everything being equal and everything being fair, that system was better in place than what we have now. And as time has gone on, the drip continued to happen, that the corporate people continued to take more and more and more and more. And it didn't just affect, obviously, Black people and minorities were way affected by this well before any of us, but it continued to affect the white people that they didn't even know it. And they're voting for people like a Ronald Reagan, who would tell you, we're going to do more for these corporate people, but it's going to trickle down to you guys. Don't worry about it. And it never fucking happened.
Right.
And they still want that system.
Right.
Because they believe it's going to happen, even though there is no proof, just like the fucking election was never stolen. They don't care about proof. They just care about what they're being told and what makes them feel good.
I still don't understand. Like, I still don't understand. Is it like the endorsement? Like, what if the corporations were on Biden's side? How does that help translate into a win for us in November?
If they were on his side?
Yes.
Well, I think you'd have a lot more people who were intelligent and getting the word out to people that, and by the way, a lot of these corporate people who make the millions and billions of dollars, they own a lot of the media places that that control this narrative.
It would change Murdoch's mind.
It would change. It would, if the question you had was if they were on Biden's side. If they were on Biden's side, then the actual truth that is getting out into the media, that is owned by these billionaires that are distributing this bullshit out to people, that's a major. In fact, I think if these corporate people were on Biden's side, if you had all Mark Cubans were on Biden's side, wouldn't even be close. It would be a fucking blowout. Trump would probably drop out by now. He probably would never. He wouldn't. First of all, he would never have been president.
Right. Yeah, they'd never be on. Like, I can't even imagine that happening.
Well,
ever.
It never will. I'm answering the question based on a hypothetical, but you're right. It never, ever will, because, again, I think at the end of the day, their taxes being cut as much as possible, knowing even if it's a moderate to slow economy, is still better for them than a thriving economy with their taxes going up. I guess obviously they've done the math, and that makes a lot more sense for them.
Right.
And it really sucks, because it affects all of us, because a lot of us are their workers. We work for them, and they don't give a fuck about us. And this is just something that's so clear and easy to see, but nobody wants to see it. And part of it is because I like being angry at fucking black people. I like being angry at trans people. I like being angry at immigrants and Mexicans, and how that satisfies your fucking day.
Right. But again, it's the ignorance, right? Because it's like immigrants pay so much into the system. They pay taxes too. We need their taxes. That helps our economy.
Lana, I read a report just today, that said the CBC said that immigration between 2021 and 2026, as it goes on, that it will eliminate, I wanted to say it was like $10 billion or something like that off the debt.
It's built.
I mean, it's
because
they come in
Social Security. Like, don't we want them paying into this stuff?
Well, first of all, a lot of them come in and they get paid nothing, right? So they get paid nothing. But as they're here more, they're going to wind up getting paid more. They're going to wind up being paid more in taxes. They're going to wind up spending more. So it's going to be better for the economy if they come in. But you know what they want to do, Lana? They want to make you think that because they can take an anecdote and find 1, 2, 3 different cases where some girl was raped by an illegal immigrant, by one girl was murdered in Georgia. They are going to make it look like this happens every day.
It's just dumb.
It's dumb, and it's frustrating that people get so duped and easily manipulated by this bullshit.